The scissors gleamed with malice, their rusty edges catching the alley's harsh sunlight. Kofi's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a fury he'd learned to cage long ago. It was a humid afternoon in Southside, Chicago, where the air clung to your skin like a bad memory. Kofi Jackson, 16, walked through the alley behind his school, his worn-out sneakers crunching on broken glass. His dreads, meticulously grown over years, swung gently as he moved each lock, a tribute to his Ghanaian roots, a quiet rebellion against the world that often stared too long. He was used to the whispers, the side eyes, the occasional slurs tossed like pebbles from kids who thought they owned the place. But today, the air felt heavier, charged with something uglier.
Yo, Driadiav.
The voice was sharp, slicing through the hum of distant traffic. Kofi stopped, his shoulders tensing. He knew that tone. Tyler Grayson, the school's self-appointed king of cruelty, with his sidekick, Jake, always trailing like a loyal dog. They emerged from behind a dumpster, Tyler's smirk wide enough to show his crooked teeth, Jake's laugh a nervous echo. In Tyler's hand, a pair of scissors glinted, the kind you'd find in a janitor's closet, not a barber's. "What's good, Ty?" Kofi said, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened. He sized them up. Tyler, tall and wiry, with a swagger that screamed insecurity. Jake, shorter, stockier, always eager to prove himself. Kofi's hands stayed loose at his sides, but his mind was already mapping the alley 10 steps to the street. A chain-link fence to his left, no one else around. "Your hair, man," Tyler said, stepping closer, twirling the scissors. "It's like a damn jungle. Time for a trim, don't you think?" Jake snickered, shifting his weight, his eyes darting between Tyler and Kofi. The alley seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as Tyler's grin widened. Kofi's jaw tightened. He'd heard it all before: jungle, mop, rat's nest. Words meant to cut deeper than any blade. But this wasn't just words. Tyler was crossing a line, and Kofi felt the old fire stirring. The one he'd spent years taming in the gym, on the mat, where sweat and discipline turned rage into precision. He was no ordinary kid. Kofi was a national MMA champion, a fact he kept buried under baggy hoodies and a quiet demeanor. Southside wasn't kind to those who stood out, and Kofi had learned early to blend in. "Walk away, Ty," Kofi said, his voice low, almost a growl. "You don't want this." Tyler laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Oh, I want this. You think you're special, huh? Strutting around with that hair like you're better than us." He stepped closer, the scissors now inches from Kofi's face. "Hold him, Jake." Jake hesitated, his eyes flickering with doubt, but he grabbed Kofi's arm, his grip weak but enough to irritate. Kofi could have broken free in a heartbeat. His training screamed for a quick twist, a jab, a takedown, but he held back. Not yet. He'd learned control the hard way, through bruises and broken bones in the octagon, where losing your cool meant losing everything. "Last chance," Kofi said, his eyes locked on Tyler's. The bully's smirk faltered for a split second, but he shook it off, stepping forward with the scissors. The first snip was loud, a metallic crunch as a dreadlock fell to the ground. Kofi's breath caught, his chest tightening as if the blade had grazed his skin. Another snip, another lock. Tyler laughed, tossing the hair into the dirt, while Jake's grip tightened, his nervous chuckle fading. "Look at that," Tyler crowed, holding up a severed dread. "Much better, right? Now you fit in." The alley spun in Kofi's vision, not from dizziness but from the flood of memories. His mother braiding his hair as a kid, her stories of their ancestors, warriors who wore their locks like crowns. Each snip was a theft, not just of hair but of identity, of pride. The fire in him roared, but he clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. He wasn't a kid anymore, reacting with fists and fury. He was a fighter, and fighters chose their moments. "You done?" Kofi asked, his voice eerily calm. Tyler paused, the scissors hovering, his confidence wavering under Kofi's unblinking stare. "Not yet," Tyler said, but his voice cracked. He grabbed another dread, the scissors snapping shut. Kofi's restraint snapped to not into violence, but into something colder, sharper. He twisted his arm free from Jake's grip with a fluid motion, stepping back to create space. The alley was silent now, save for the distant wail of a siren. "You think this is power?" Kofi said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Cutting my hair to feel big? You're pathetic." He took a step forward, and Tyler flinched, the scissors dropping slightly. Jake backed away, his hands up like he was already surrendering. "Shut up," Tyler snapped, lunging forward, the scissors aimed at Kofi's chest. It was a mistake. Kofi's training kicked in muscle memory honed by years of sparring. He sidestepped, grabbing Tyler's wrist and twisting it just enough to make him drop the scissors. They clattered to the pavement, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Tyler yelped, stumbling back, his bravado crumbling. "Don't," Kofi said, his voice a warning, his eyes burning with a quiet fury that made Jake freeze. "You don't know who you're messing with." Tyler scrambled to his feet, his face red with humiliation. "You're nothing," he spat, but his voice trembled. "Just another." "Say it," Kofi cut in, stepping closer. "Say the word you're thinking. Let's hear it." His voice was low, dangerous, each word a challenge. Tyler's mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting to the scissors on the ground, then back to Kofi. The alley felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode. Jake tugged at Tyler's sleeve. "Let's go, man. This ain't worth it." Tyler shook him off, his pride wounded, his ego screaming for a win. "You think you scare me?" he said, but his step back betrayed him. Kofi didn't move, didn't blink, his presence alone enough to shift the power in the alley. The bullies had miscalculated, and they were starting to feel it. Kofi bent down, picking up one of his severed dreads. He held it up, his eyes never leaving Tyler's. "This," he said, "is mine. You don't get to take it. You don't get to take anything from me." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Tyler's face twisted, a mix of anger and shame, but he didn't move. Jake was already edging toward the street, his earlier bravado gone. The alley was no longer theirs, it was Kofi's, and they knew it. But the story didn't end there. Southside had a way of pulling you back, of testing you when you thought you'd won. The next day, Tyler didn't show up to school, but the rumors did. Whispers spread like wildfire. Kofi's hair, Tyler's scissors, the alley showdown. By lunch, the story had grown legs, twisted into something bigger, uglier. Someone said Tyler was planning revenge, that he'd rounded up older kids, guys with reputations that made Jake look like a choir boy. Kofi heard it all, felt the eyes on him in the cafeteria, but he kept his head down, his tray of soggy fries untouched. He wasn't afraid, not exactly. Fear was something he'd faced down in the octagon, where punches came faster than words. But this was different. This was his life, his school, his community, where every move was a statement, every choice a risk. He thought of his coach, Marcus, who drilled into him that real strength wasn't in the fight but in what you fought for. Kofi had fought for respect, for his identity, but now the stakes were higher. That afternoon, he went to the gym, the one place where the world made sense. The smell of sweat and rubber mats grounded him as he wrapped his hands, his knuckles still raw from clenching them in the alley. Marcus was there, his graying beard and stern eyes a constant in Kofi's chaotic world. "Heard about yesterday," Marcus said, tossing Kofi a pair of gloves. "You good?" Kofi nodded, but his silence said more. Marcus didn't push. He just pointed to the heavy bag. "Let it out." Kofi hit the bag, each punch a release, each thud a reminder of who he was. National champion, Southside kid, son of a mother who'd taught him to stand tall. But as he pounded the bag, he couldn't shake the image of Tyler's face, the scissors, the dreads on the ground. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every kid who'd been mocked, pushed, made to feel small because of their skin, their hair, their existence. By the time he left the gym, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gray. He walked home, his hoodie up, his uneven hair tucked under the hood. The streets were alive with noise kids playing, cars honking, music blaring from open windows. But Kofi felt the weight of eyes on him, real or imagined. He knew Tyler wouldn't let it go. Bullies like him never did. They fed on power, and Kofi had taken that from him. Sure enough, trouble found him the next day. It was after school, in the same alley, as if fate had a sick sense of humor. This time, Tyler wasn't alone. 2 older guys flanked him, their faces hard, their postures screaming trouble. Jake was there too, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Kofi's stomach twisted, but his training kept him calm. He dropped his backpack, his body loose, ready. "Thought you were tough, huh?" Tyler said, his voice louder now, fueled by the presence of his new crew. "You're gonna pay for making me look stupid." Kofi didn't respond. He didn't need to. His eyes scanned the group, calculating. The older guys were bigger, maybe 18, with the kind of swagger that came from too many fights won. But Kofi had faced worse in the cage opponents who hit harder, moved faster, wanted it more. He knew how to read a fight, how to wait for the right moment. "You don't have to do this," Kofi said, his voice steady, almost gentle. "Walk away. We're good." Tyler laughed, but it was forced, his eyes darting to his crew for approval. "Nah, we ain't good. You think you're some kind of hero? Let's see how tough you are now." The first guy moved, a big dude with a scar across his cheek, his fist swinging before Kofi could blink. But Kofi was ready. He ducked, the punch grazing his shoulder, and countered with a quick jab to the guy's ribs, just enough to stagger him. The second guy came in fast, aiming for Kofi's head, but Kofi sidestepped, using the guy's momentum to shove him into the fence. It wasn't flashy, just efficient years of training distilled into split-second decisions. Tyler's face paled as his crew stumbled, their confidence cracking. Jake backed away, muttering something about leaving. Kofi stood his ground, his breathing steady, his eyes locked on Tyler. "This what you wanted?" he asked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You think this makes you strong?" The scarred guy recovered, lunging again, but Kofi was done playing. He caught the guy's arm, twisted it behind his back, and swept his legs, sending him to the ground with a thud. The second guy hesitated, then backed off, hands up. Tyler was alone now, his bravado gone, his eyes wide with panic. Kofi stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "I'm not your enemy, Ty. But you keep coming for me, you're gonna learn the hard way." He didn't throw another punch. He didn't need to. The alley was silent, the fight over before it could escalate further. Tyler's crew scattered, leaving him standing there, small and exposed. Kofi picked up his backpack, his heart still racing, and walked away. He didn't look back. Kofi's footsteps echoed in the alley as he walked away, the weight of the confrontation clinging to him like the humid Chicago air. His uneven hair, now a jagged reminder of Tyler's cruelty, felt foreign under his hoodie. He wanted to go home, to shut the world out, but Southside had other plans. The streets buzzed with whispers, and by the time he reached his apartment, his phone was lighting up with texts. The alley fight had gone viral. Someone had recorded it. A shaky video capturing Kofi's swift takedown of Tyler's crew. The comments were a mix of awe and venom. "That's Kofi Jackson, MMA champ. Tyler got what he deserved. Just another thug fight." Kofi tossed his phone onto his bed, his chest tight. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt exposed. His quiet life unraveling under the glare of 1,000 strangers' opinions. His mother, Amara, was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of jollof rice, her eyes narrowing as she caught his expression. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, the kind that could pull truth from stone. He told her everything: the scissors, the alley, the fight. Her face hardened, not with anger but with a pain Kofi knew too well. She'd faced her own battles, a Ghanaian immigrant in a city that often saw her as less. She set the spoon down and pulled him into a hug, her braid brushing his cheek. "You're more than what they do to you," she said. "But you can't let them pull you down to their level." Her words stuck with him, but they didn't erase the knot in his stomach. The next day at school, the air was electric. Kids stared, some with respect, others with resentment. Tyler wasn't there, suspended. The rumors said, but his absence didn't mean peace. Kofi felt the tension in the hallways, the way groups hushed when he passed. He kept his head down, but his mind was racing. The video had turned him into a symbol, but of what? Justice? Violence? The lines were blurring. At lunch, his best friend, Malik, slid into the seat across from him, his grin wide. "Man, you're a legend. Tyler's done for." Malik was all energy, his cornrows tight and his voice loud enough to draw eyes. But Kofi didn't smile back. "It's not a win," Kofi said, poking at his food. "They're not gonna stop. It's just gonna get worse." Malik's grin faded. "So what? You showed you're not weak. That's what matters." Kofi shook his head. "It's not about weak or strong. It's about why they're coming for me in the first place." He didn't say the word racism, but it hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Malik looked away, his silence an acknowledgement. They'd both felt it, the way their skin marked them as targets, the way their pride was seen as a threat. That afternoon, Kofi skipped his last class and headed to the gym. The familiar smell of sweat and leather calmed him, but only so much. Marcus was there, wrapping a kid's hands for sparring. He caught Kofi's eye and nodded toward the office, a cramped room with peeling paint and a desk cluttered with fight posters. "Talk," Marcus said, closing the door. Kofi sank into a chair, the weight of the past few days spilling out. He told Marcus about the video, the stares, the fear that Tyler's crew would come back harder. Marcus listened, his face unreadable, until Kofi fell silent. Then he leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "You're a fighter, Kofi. Not just in the cage. Out there too. But you gotta decide what you're fighting for." Kofi frowned. "I'm fighting for respect. For me, for my family." Marcus nodded. "Good. But respect ain't just about winning. It's about changing the game. You took Tyler down, but what's next? You gonna keep fighting every punk who comes for you? Or are you gonna show there's another way?" The words hit hard. Kofi had spent years perfecting his hooks and takedowns, but this was a different kind of fight, one he wasn't sure he knew how to win. He left the gym with Marcus's words echoing in his head, the city's lights flickering like stars against the dusk. The next week was a blur of tension. Tyler returned to school, his swagger dimmed but his eyes burning with resentment. He avoided Kofi, but the whispers didn't stop. Someone spray-painted "champ" on Kofi's locker, but the word felt more like a target than a crown. Kofi kept training, kept his grades up, kept his head down. But the video kept spreading, and with it, the pressure. Local news picked it up, framing it as a feel-good story. Teen MMA star fends off bullies. They didn't mention the scissors, the dreads, the ugliness beneath it all. Then came the assembly. The principal, a tired man with a knack for dodging hard truths, called the school together to address recent events. Kofi sat in the back, his stomach churning as the principal droned on about bullying and respect, never once saying the word race. The room was restless, kids whispering, some glancing at Kofi, others at Tyler, who sat a few rows away, his jaw tight. When the principal opened the floor for questions, Malik stood up, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Why we acting like this is just about bullying? Tyler didn't just mess with Kofi. He cut his hair 'cause he's black. Why ain't we talking about that? The room went silent, the air thick with discomfort. The principal stammered, muttering about unity, but Malik didn't sit down. Y'all keep ignoring it, but we see it. Every day. He looked at Kofi, a silent challenge to speak. Kofi's heart raced. He didn't want to be the poster boy for a fight he hadn't chosen. But Malik's words, Marcus's advice, his mother's strength, they pushed him to his feet. The gym had taught him to face fear, and this was no different. He walked to the mic, every eye on him, the weight of the moment crushing. My hair, he started. His voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. Wasn't just hair. It was my history, my pride. Tyler didn't just cut it to mess with me. He did it to make me feel less. Because of who I am. He paused, his eyes finding Tyler's, who looked away. I could have hurt him, but I didn't. Because that's not who I am. The room was still, his words sinking in. Kofi kept going, his voice growing stronger. This ain't just about me and Tyler. It's about all of us. How we treat each other. How we let hate slide 'cause it's easier than calling it out. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for change. He sat down, his hands shaking, the silence deafening. Then slowly a few kids clapped. Then more. Not everyone. Some rolled their eyes. Others whispered, but it was enough. The principal fumbled through a closing speech, but the moment belonged to Kofi. After the assembly, Tyler cornered him in the hallway, his face a mix of anger and something softer, almost regret. You think you're better than me now? He said, but his voice lacked its usual bite. Kofi met his gaze. I don't think I'm better. I just think we can be better. He walked away, leaving Tyler standing there, his fists clenched but empty. The weeks that followed were uneven. Some kids reached out to Kofi, sharing their own stories of being targeted, of feeling invisible. Others doubled down, their resentment simmering. The school started a diversity council, but it felt like a band-aid on a broken bone. Kofi kept training, kept studying, kept moving forward. His hair began to grow back, uneven but his own, a quiet act of reclaiming. One day, Marcus called him to the gym after hours. A group of kids was there, some from school, some from the neighborhood, black, white, Latino, all ages. Marcus nodded toward them. They heard about you. They want to learn. Not just to fight, but to stand up. Kofi looked at the group, their faces eager, nervous, hopeful. He saw himself in them, the kid who'd learned to fight because the world gave him no choice, but who'd also learned to hope for something better. He stepped forward, his voice steady. All right, let's start. Over the months, the gym became a haven, not just for fighting but for talking, for healing. Kofi led classes, sharing his skills and his story. Tyler showed up once, lingering at the door, but didn't stay. Kofi didn't push him. Change took time and not everyone was ready. By spring, Kofi's hair was long enough to braid again. His mother did it one evening, her hands gentle, her stories of their ancestors filling the room. "You're a warrior," she said, tying off the last braid. "Not because you fight, but because you choose when to." The viral video faded, replaced by newer stories, but its impact lingered. Kofi wasn't a symbol anymore, was a leader, flawed but trying. He'd face down scissors, fists, and hate, and come out stronger, not because he'd won, but because he'd chosen to rise above. Southside didn't change overnight. The whispers, the stares, the divides, they were still there. But Kofi's gym classes grew, each kid a small rebellion against the status quo. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a start. Respect not just demanded but given, even to those who didn't deserve it yet. As he walked through the alley one last time, now a shortcut to the gym, he saw the wooden plank still leaning against the dumpster. Its chalked words faded but clear. "Bully's lesson. Respect wins." He smiled, not because it was over, but because it was beginning. What do you think wears the line between justice and revenge? How do we heal a community when hate runs deep?